Matt Miguez has plenty on his mind, and he's ready to share it with the world. It's time to hear the Miguez Mindset.
Welcome into the Miguez Mindset podcast here on ESPN 1037 Lafayette and 1041 Lake Charles YouTube page. My name is Matt Miguez. This week, we've talked a lot about college football, and we're going to continue that today. I've got a preview of the Cajuns and the Troy Trojans coming your way in just a little bit. But real quickly, I just want to touch on the fact that Michaela Williams, a true freshman who's playing for LSU women's basketball, dropped 42 points the other day against Kent State. She was on 15 of 20 shooting from the field. It's insane that in just 3 or 4 games, she has become the number one scoring option for LSU's offense. On a team with Angel Reese, Flau'jae Johnson, Haley Van Lith, Anissa Morrow, they're turning to the true freshman to put points on the board, and that's just remarkable to me. They've got another game tonight against Southeastern Louisiana. Kim Mulkey returns to her home parish to coach against the Southeastern Lions. That game coming up at 7 o'clock tonight. But I want to shift focus back to the Ragin Cajuns, sitting at 5-5, coming off of 2 straight bad losses against Arkansas State and Southern Miss. They still have the opportunity to be bowl eligible. They need one more win in the final 2 games. And they've got a good opportunity to play a very tough opponent tomorrow afternoon in Troy. The Trojans 8-2 on the year. They're 16.5-point favorites tomorrow afternoon from the Vet in Troy, Alabama. Joining me on the podcast today to preview the matchup is the voice of the Trojans, Mr. Barry McKnight.
Joining me here on the Miguez Mindset to preview this Sun Belt West matchup between Troy and Louisiana is the voice of the Trojans, Mr. Barry McKnight. Barry, really appreciate you taking the time. How are you?
I'm doing well. Always great to get a chance to talk with you, Matt. Looking forward to this.
So let's talk about the Trojans. 8-2 so far this year, doing a nice job of defending their Sun Belt Conference championship from a year ago. 5-1 in the West, well on their way to representing the West once again in that conference championship game. Just kind of talk to me about this season for John Summerall's team. Gunnar Watson looks like he took a dramatic step in the right direction this year. Kamani Vidal's over 1,100 yards already. Just kind of talk to me about what you've seen out of this Trojans football team so far.
Well, as far as the ups and downs and the flow of this season, Matt, it's been familiar. Last year, same start, 1-2 start, and the Trojans didn't lose again last year on the way to the championship. This year, 1-2 start, and it really kind of caught a hot streak, to be honest with you. And you've hit on the individuals that have led it on offense. It's basic fundamental football. It's a very, very good defense, an accent on the running game, and a 6th-year quarterback who knows where to go with the football. It's elemental. Sometimes offensively, it's not all that exciting. Defensively, my gosh, that's been the tone and the culture of this team for the last 2 years, is how much they get after it on defense. That has set the tone. That has enabled the offense to kind of once again grow into themselves a little bit with all of the new guys on the offensive line. And really, right now, everything's cooking pretty well. The injuries have stayed away, knock on wood. Vidal has been just as consistent as you can imagine. And the defense is getting better and better every game.
John Summerall is now 20-4 in his time at Troy. I mean, have you ever seen a coach hit the ground running that quickly?
Well, a couple of things about it. The answer in a word is no. But I think there's a couple of things about it. Number one, it was really primed for success, Matt. If you remember when Chip Lindsey was here, it was so close. There were 5-win seasons 3 times in a row. One year we were supposed to play ULM at the end of the year, would have gotten us into bowl eligibility, but it didn't happen because of COVID. And there were so many games that Troy was right there at the end and couldn't close it. That has changed. Troy has been phenomenal when they've been down at the half. They've been phenomenal when they've, in close ball games and 1-score games. And that's been the difference. Those close losses before have turned into gut check wins for this team. And I think most of that is not necessarily scheme or game planning or even adjustments at halftime. I think most of that's culture. This was a team that had talent, that had always doubted themselves. And now he has injected such a sense of energy and such a sense of culture and positivity that now, when it's late in a ball game, and there's been a lot of them, including last year down in Lafayette, when it's late in the game and the game's on the line, instead of looking to somebody else to make the play, everybody is looking to make the play themselves, if that makes sense. That has been, more than anything else, the most obvious change in the last couple of years. There was talent, and he hit the ground running. He had a lot of good players. Vidal was a recruit under the previous regime. So was Gunner. So were those defensive players, Jubinor and Javon Solomon and Del Pettis and those guys. So he came into a situation that was really ripe for success.
You brought up guys like Javon Solomon and then Del Pettis. You talked, obviously the defense is the bread and butter of this football team. John Summerall's a defensive minded guy. It only makes sense. Now, but one thing that I would like to discuss is, coming into this season, I was kind of worried about this defense, strictly because how do you replace a guy like Carlton Martial? But it seems, Barry, that it's been no Carlton Martial, no problem.
That was our question, too. I mean, the all-time leading tackler in the history of the NCAA, you lose him, and I'm not going to be the one to say, oh, that's no big deal. It is. And you lose KJ Robertson, the other linebacker, and Will Cholo on the defensive line, and you lose Craig Slocum on the back end of the secondary. But Carlton was the big miss and the big replacement. There's a guy named Jaden McDonald who was hurt last year, and he's come in, done really, really well. A couple of the young linebackers have helped. You and I have talked about this before, probably off camera and off microphone. The key to the defense is that everybody runs. Everybody can really, really move, especially along that front. One of the keys, I think, defensively was not only finding McDonald to help replace some of Carlton's production, but also moving. You remember last year, Jubinor and Javon Solomon both played the bandit, the buck defensive end, that hybrid end linebacker position. They both played that. Summerall said he got tired on defense of looking over beside him on the sidelines and seeing one of them standing next to him. And he told the defensive coaches, we got to get them both on the field. Now, Solomon moved to the defensive end position. It's not where he's going to play at the next level, and he is going to play at the next level. He's going to be a linebacker bandit kind of guy, but he did it for the team. It was a remarkably selfless move for Javon Solomon. So now what do, Matt? Do you chip on Jubinor? Do you double team Solomon? Somebody's going to be free at some point in every offensive possession. That has been, I think, more than anything, the contribution Summerall has made in terms of X's and O's to the defense this year.
Now, looking at this matchup, the Cajuns have had a slew of injury problems now on their third starting quarterback of the season. Your starting center went down a week ago against Southern Miss on Thursday night. I don't want to word the question of how does Troy take advantage of those situations, but kind of how does Troy kind of look at that and go, okay, they have weaknesses that we can exploit?
Well, you always try to exploit weaknesses. Let's be real. So much of what Troy is focused on is Troy trying to do what Troy does well. But you want to exploit those things. And I'm telling you, it is a little bit of a different matchup without Wildrees or without Zion Chris in there. There's no doubt about that. What you want to do, though, is you want to put pressure on him. You want to make his decision time as minuscule as you possibly can at quarterback. I will tell you this. One of the things that Coach Summerall said during his coach's show and during our interviews, he loves the Louisiana offensive line when it's healthy. I mean, losing the center is a big deal, but he said, other than Kansas State in week 2, who had a Big 12 offensive lineman of the year and a 2-time All-American on their offensive line. He thinks this is the best offensive line potentially that Troy will face, tackles and guards. I think this is where it comes down to. Can they give enough time to make those decisions at quarterback? Can they disrupt the running game? Can they disrupt the timing in the pass game? I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do, but I think prime directive number one, it really is not changing. Troy's going to get after the quarterback. There's no question about that.
Now, if you had to pinpoint one X factor for Troy, either on the offensive side, defensive side, maybe even special teams, who are you looking out for as somebody that can really be a difference maker on Saturday afternoon?
Well, it's curious because Chris Lewis, who's our rangy wide receiver, he's 6'4". I think, and this is top of my head, I think he's caught 28 balls this year. 7 of them have been for touchdowns. He had 3 touchdown catches against South Alabama. He's had a couple in a couple of other games, but he's been quiet. He was quiet against ULM last week. He was really quiet in a couple of the other games. I think he can be a real difference maker. I watched the Southern Miss tape. I think Lewis can be that guy. He can be the big matchup problem that Troy presents offensively against the Louisiana secondary. But, it's all, a lot of it's up to him. He's a great kid. There's nothing wrong with his demeanor or his attitude. But there are times when he just does not seem to be on the same page with Gunner. But when he is, boy, he is really, really good.
Yeah, you were close. It's 22 catches.
Not even 28. Yeah. So
Yeah.
22 catches, 1 out of every 3 or 4 catches he makes goes the distance.
Yeah.
That's unheard of. He's very explosive.
He's averaging 24.3 yards per catch,
which is number one amongst players who have had 40 targets in the country. Gunnar Watson is the number 1 rated passer in the group of 5 in terms of efficiency this year, which he wasn't always that. So Gunnar knows where to go with the ball if he has time. If Vidal gets off early, boy, I do like Troy's chances. I'll admit that to you for sure.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Troy's a 16.5-point favorite this Saturday at Veterans Memorial Stadium. Now, if Troy wants to hold on to that and pick up their 8th straight victory of this season, what's got to happen for John Summerall's team?
Well, number one, they've got to play to the crowd. It is a big deal here. It's the final home game of the regular season. It's Larry Blakeney Day, and there are hundreds of his former players that are going to be here. We're expecting a big crowd for this one, and that always kind of gets everything's juiced up at the Vet. It's a great place to watch a game. So getting off to a good start is a cliche, but I think that's definitely the case. Watch the offensive line. If there's one area that I'm not necessarily sure is a weakness for Troy, but one in which there has been growth and needs to be some more, it's on the offensive line. Gunnar has been clean most of the year. But if they can put pressure on him, I think that's Louisiana's best chance to disrupt what Troy wants to do on offense. Watch the Troy offensive line versus the Cajuns on the defensive front.
Barry McKnight, the voice of the Trojans, joining us here on the Miguez Mindset podcast. Barry, appreciate your time as always. Have a great call on Saturday, and hopefully we can talk soon about more Troy football.
Let's do it. Absolutely. I always look forward to it, Matt. Thanks for the time.
Hope you enjoyed that conversation with Barry McKnight, the voice of the Trojans. That game tomorrow coming up at 2:30. Also, LSU hosting Georgia State. Jaden Daniels continues his quest for a Heisman. Kickoff at 7 in that one. Pregame at 5 o'clock on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Lake Charles. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and share this video, share it with your friends, and make sure you go follow us on social media as well at ESPN_Southwest Louisiana, or SWLA, I should say. I'll be back on Monday to recap the weekend and get you set for Thanksgiving week right here on ESPN 103.7 Lafayette and 104.1 Lake Charles.